"Fly the helicopter, and I'll make your son my heir," laughed the millionaire without knowing that the black woman was the owner. "Fly this helicopter, and I'll make your son the heir to my fortune." Richard Blackstone laughed, pointing to the aircraft parked on the terrace of his Manhattan penthouse. His words echoed through the luxurious surroundings as 42-year-old Victoria Williams stood motionless by the infinity pool. The party was in full swing. 50 guests from New York's elite watched the scene with the morbid interest that only the very rich feel when someone is about to be publicly humiliated. Victoria had arrived there as a helicopter mechanic hired for a routine inspection in the middle of Richard's birthday celebration. She never imagined that this simple maintenance job would turn into the cruelest humiliation she had ever witnessed. Richard, drunk with power and Dom Perignon champagne, had decided to turn a working woman into entertainment for his billionaire friends. "Listen up, everyone." Richard clapped his hands, drawing attention. "This lady here says she knows about helicopters. Apparently, tinkering with screws qualifies her to fly a $12 million aircraft." Cruel laughter filled the terrace. Victoria held her toolbox tightly. Her 20 years working with aircraft had taught her that some battles are won in silence, watching the enemy reveal all their cards before showing her own. "Sarah, dear," Richard turned to his wife, "do you believe someone like this would know how to distinguish a cyclic from a rudder pedal?" More laughter followed. Sarah Blackstone, eternally young thanks to plastic surgery, whispered something to her friends that made them laugh even louder. "My son works at the municipal airport," Victoria replied calmly, ignoring the condescending looks. "He dreams of being a commercial pilot one day." "Oh, how touching," Richard made an exaggerated grimace. "A lovely dream for people like you. But let's be realistic, dear. Commercial piloting requires education, refinement, a certain social class." Victoria felt every word like a blade, but kept her expression serene. What Richard couldn't see was the calculated storm brewing behind those calm eyes. "So here's my proposal," Richard spread his arms theatrically. "If you can take off in my helicopter and fly once around the building, I guarantee that your son will become the heir to 50% of my fortune, an $800 million deal." The silence that fell over the terrace was absolute. Even the waiters stopped serving drinks. "And if I fail?" Victoria asked, her voice betraying a genuine curiosity that made Richard smile even more mischievously. "If you fail, you sign a document publicly admitting that people of your condition should not aspire beyond their natural limitations. It will be posted on all my social media accounts for my 2 million followers." Victoria looked at the helicopter, then at Richard, then at the 50 faces waiting for her response with almost thirsty anticipation. For a moment, something that looked like vulnerability crossed her face, as if she were weighing the impossible weight of the challenge. But anyone looking more closely would have realized that it wasn't fear that made her hands hesitate over the toolbox. It was the restrained power of someone about to completely rewrite the rules of a game that others didn't even know they were losing. "I accept," she said simply, and something in the quietness of her voice made some guests look at each other uncomfortably. Richard clapped his hands, ecstatic. "Wonderful. Is anyone filming? I need to document this historic moment for posterity. If this story of prejudice and reversal touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple moment of humiliation would become the catalyst for a revolution that would forever change the lives of everyone on that terrace." Richard was ecstatic. In his 60 years of life, few things gave him as much pleasure as seeing people know their place in the social hierarchy that he considered natural and unquestionable. Now in front of 50 witnesses from New York's elite, he was about to deliver what he considered a necessary lesson in reality. "Sarah, dear, record everything," he instructed his wife, who already had her cell phone in position. "This will make perfect content for my YouTube channel. 2 million followers will love to see how the real world works." Victoria watched the commotion around her. With that same disconcerting calm, the guests formed a semicircle around the area where the helicopter was parked, their champagne glasses sparkling under the terrace lights, some already whispering bets about how long it would take her to give up. Before we begin this spectacle, Richard paused dramatically. I think it's only fair that everyone understands exactly what's at stake here. He walked over to Victoria, stopping uncomfortably close. This lady has been repairing helicopters for how many years now? 20 years, Victoria replied without flinching. 20 years, Richard repeated to the audience. 20 years of turning screws and changing oil. And now she has the audacity to think that qualifies her to fly an aircraft that costs more than most houses. Margaret Whitmore, the mayor's wife, whispered that Richard was being too cruel. But her voice was drowned by the laughter of the other guests. You know what bothers me the most? Richard continued, his voice taking on a venomous tone. It's this arrogance disguised as humility. This pretense that hard work replaces education. Class birth, he gestured theatrically. As if fixing equipment is the same as commanding it. Victoria clenched her fists for a split second. A subtle movement noticed only by the most attentive observers. Memories surfaced of her 19-year-old son Michael working 2 jobs for aviation school, studying aerodynamics while she reviewed mechanics manuals at the kitchen table. My son is going to be a pilot, she said, her voice cutting through the laughter. And he's going to fly for airlines that people like you will never be able to afford. The tense silence made Richard blink before recovering. How touching. But dreams don't pay for flight school tuition. Do you have any idea what it costs to train a commercial pilot? $300,000 minimum. He turned to the guests. Imagine a woman who earns, $40,000 a year, thinking she can afford an elite education for her son. The cruelty fed a flame inside Victoria instead of weakening her. Her eyes fixed on the helicopter with a familiarity that made some spectators wonder why she looked so comfortable. James, Richard called to his assistant, bring the papers I prepared. I want her to sign them before she tries to fly. He smiled maliciously. A simple document confirming she understands the risks of attempting to fly without proper qualifications and assumes responsibility for any accident. James brought the clipboard. Richard added, there's also a clause, if you fail when you fail, you agree to record a video admitting that people of your background shouldn't aspire beyond their natural abilities. Nothing personal, just social realism. What he didn't notice was the growing discomfort among some elites. Marina Blackwood, Robert Chun, who exchanged uneasy glances as the cruelty escalated. What if I do it? Victoria asked calmly. Impossible, Richard laughed. But hypothetically, if you manage to take off and land without killing anyone, I'll honor my word. Your son becomes heir to $800 million. And I'll post a video admitting I was wrong. Victoria signed the documents fluidly, without hesitation, making several guests wonder if the outcome might be very different from what they expected. Excellent, Richard clapped. Now, anyone want to place bets? How long before she gives up? As bets flew around, Victoria walked toward the helicopter, and her steps changed, the confident stride of someone who knew exactly where she was going. She opened the aircraft door and examined the interior with eyes that knew every instrument. Adjusting the seat and testing the pedals, she moved as if she had done it 1,000 times. Every humiliation fueled a silent strength within her, turning their contempt into the exact energy she needed. She adjusted her seatbelt with precise movements that made Margaret Whitmore frown. Her hands touched each control without hesitation, as if the cockpit were familiar territory. This is taking too long, Richard shouted. Have you changed your mind? Want to give up? No one will blame you for recognizing your limitations. Victoria ignored him, her fingers moving over the navigation instruments, checking the altimeter, fuel gauge, and hydraulic systems with methodical precision. Then her phone vibrated. She glanced at the text and smiled for the first time. Documentation confirmed. Everything ready for live broadcast. Good luck, VA. Margaret whispered to her husband to look at how she was handling the controls, and John Whitmore, who had flown aircraft in his youth, watched Victoria's movements with growing interest. Sarah, Richard called to his wife, "Make sure you're recording in high resolution. I want every detail of her failure documented for posterity." Sarah complied, but something about Victoria's calm confidence made her uneasy. She had worked as a TV producer before marrying Richard, and had developed an instinct for recognizing when a story was about to take an unexpected turn. Richard, intoxicated by power and the adrenaline rush of public cruelty, decided to heighten the humiliation even further. "Listen up, everyone," he shouted, ensuring the attention of every guest. "Since our amateur pilot is taking so long to figure out how to start the engine, how about we make this even more interesting?" He pulled out his phone and opened his Instagram account, where 2 million followers awaited content. "I'm live streaming this to my followers right now. The whole world will be able to witness this educational moment about social realism and inappropriate aspirations." What Richard didn't know was that at that very moment, Michael Williams, a 19-year-old aviation student and Victoria's son, was in the hangar at the municipal airport watching the live stream with his classmates. His fists were clenched, but a smile was growing on his face. He knew something that none of the people on that terrace knew. "Mom," he whispered to the screen, "show them who you really are." On the terrace, Victoria finished her pre-flight inspection with the same meticulousness her Air Force instructors had taught her 20 years ago. Yes, she had worked as a mechanic for 2 decades, but that wasn't the whole story. Victoria Williams had been a military helicopter pilot for 8 years, before leaving active duty to raise her son as a single mother. Marina Blackwood approached Robert Chun discreetly, whispering that something bothered her about the situation, that Victoria's body language and the way she checked the instruments didn't strike her as amateurish. Robert nodded, his years as a CEO having taught him to read people, and said Richard was making a mistake. Great business people don't get where they are by underestimating others, especially when those people take on impossible challenges with such calm. Thomas Bradford consulted his Apple Watch and noted it had been 15 minutes, far too long for someone who didn't know how to fly to be doing technical procedures. Inside the helicopter, Victoria adjusted her headset and tuned into the air traffic control frequency, and when her voice echoed over the radio, it had the military precision of her years of service. "Manhattan Control Tower, helicopter November 7th, Alpha Charlie requesting clearance for local flight. Approximate duration 15 minutes. The response came immediately. November 7th, Alpha Charlie, you are cleared for local flight. Maintain maximum altitude 1,000 feet and report your position every 5 minutes. Some of the more attentive guests noticed the naturalness of that communication. Patricia Wells pulled her husband by the arm and whispered that she had used professional aviation terminology, which was not luck or improvisation. Richard, oblivious to the murmurs of concern forming among his guests, continued performing for his online followers. Folks, you are about to witness a lesson in reality. Some people are born for certain positions in life, and others need to learn to accept their limitations. The live comments were dividing. Some supported him, others questioned the ethics of publicly humiliating a worker, but none suspected what was about to happen. Victoria checked the flight controls one last time collective. Cyclic rudder pedals, each command responding perfectly under her experienced hands. Margaret Whitmore approached Richard, urging him to reconsider because something felt wrong, but he interrupted irritably, insisting she was just a mechanic and nothing could possibly go wrong. At that exact moment, the helicopter engine roared to life with a perfect start. No hesitation and no errors, as if Victoria did this every day. Richard's smile faltered for the first time. The propellers spun faster, Guests stepped back from the wind, but Victoria remained calm, performing pre-takeoff checks with fluency only years of experience could produce. John Whitmore grabbed Richard's arm and said he knew real training when he saw it. This woman had it. For the first time, Richard felt a twinge of uncertainty as he watched her concentration, posture, and precision. "Impossible," he muttered, but something deep inside whispered he had made the biggest mistake of his life. The helicopter was ready for takeoff. Victoria looked at Richard through the glass, their eyes meeting in a moment that felt eternal, and in her gaze he saw absolute confidence. The helicopter rose with smoothness that made Richard's heart stop. No instability, no hesitation, just flawless execution. John whispered that she was a real pilot. Richard felt his legs weaken as aviation-savvy viewers commented on the precision of her movements, her radio communication, and her ease with the controls. "This can't be happening," he muttered, but the live microphone picked it up. 2 million followers watched his confidence shatter. Victoria executed a perfect turn around the building, maintaining altitude and speed. Through the terrace windows, guests saw her flying with ease that destroyed Richard's humiliation narrative. Margaret approached Sarah, saying her expression showed she knew something was wrong. Sarah, with her TV instincts, said Richard had made a terrible mistake in front of millions. Live comments shifted. "This is professional piloting. Who is this woman?" She used perfect military terminology. Richard read the comments in horror and shouted at Sarah to turn off the broadcast. She refused, saying it would look like they were hiding something. Victoria landed the helicopter with surgical precision. Even nearby champagne glasses didn't vibrate. She shut down the engine methodically and stepped out with the calm confidence of someone who had just proven herself before millions. "Satisfied with the flight?" she asked Richard. He was speechless as 50 guests watched him with horror and embarrassment. The roles were reversed. "I fulfilled my part of the agreement," she said with authority that made guests question how they had misjudged her. Marina whispered to Robert that she recognized that posture, the posture of someone in command. Victoria pulled out her phone. "While you were having fun, I took the liberty of doing some research on our host." Richard froze. "What are you doing?" "Richard Blackstone," she read aloud, "declared assets of $1.2 billion. But recent IRS investigation revealed discrepancies of $400 million in undeclared tax havens." Shock rippled across the terrace. Richard tried to grab the phone. "You can't. Case number 2023 FR 8847, New York State Supreme Court," she continued. "Investigation for tax evasion, corporate fraud, and stock manipulation. Status: under active criminal investigation." Sarah dropped her phone. The live broadcast captured everything for millions. Victoria continued, showing the screen. 3 former employees suing for sexual harassment. 5 minority suppliers defrauded. 12 families illegally evicted through bribery. "Stop!" Richard screamed, his face red with panic. "You have no right. You just publicly humiliated me," Victoria cut him off, emotion finally breaking through. "Attacked my son, my family, our dignity in front of millions. Why can you destroy people, but they can't expose the truth about you?" Robert told his wife they needed to leave before Richard was arrested. Victoria wasn't finished. "Now, about my real identity," she said with a smile that made guests recoil. "My full name is Victoria Williams Henderson, CEO of Henderson Aviation Solutions." The reaction was immediate. Henderson Aviation was one of the largest executive aviation companies on the East Coast, valued at $3 billion. Margaret Whitmore covered her mouth with her hands. "My God, Richard, you just humiliated one of the most powerful women in American aviation." 15 years in the Air Force, Victoria continued, her biography being broadcast live to an ever-growing audience. 3 decorations for exceptional service in combat, test pilot for new military helicopter models, and yes, I founded my company after leaving the service to raise my son as a single mother. Richard tried to speak, but his voice came out as a strangled squeak. The live broadcast had gone viral. Comments were pouring in by the thousands per second, all calling for his head. My son Michael, whom you have so ridiculed. He is graduating from Harvard Extension School with a degree in commercial aviation, full scholarship for academic merit. And yes, he will be a commercial pilot, but he will probably start out flying executive jets for people like you. Patricia Wells, real estate heiress, approached Victoria with genuine respect. Mrs. Williams Henderson, I apologize for the deplorable behavior we have witnessed here. The apologies are not for me, Victoria replied with dignity. They are for all the people you humiliated before me, who did not have the power or position to defend themselves. Richard's phone began ringing incessantly. Lawyers, public relations consultants, members of his company's board, all in a state of total panic. The live broadcast had become the most talked about topic on social media, and not in a positive way for him. Sarah approached him, whispering desperately, "Richard, you have to do something. The company's stock is plummeting. Your sponsors are canceling contracts. The phone won't stop ringing." Victoria watched the chaos unfold around her with her usual serenity. "Now about our original bet," she said, capturing everyone's attention again. "You said you would make my son your heir if I flew the helicopter." Richard shook his head frantically. That was a joke." "You know it was a joke." "Funny," Victoria smiled coldly. "It didn't seem like a joke when you forced me to sign documents. When you threatened to destroy my reputation. When you broadcast my supposed humiliation to 2 million people." She turned to Sarah's cell phone camera, speaking directly to the online audience. "To everyone watching today, you witnessed how prejudice and arrogance can blind people to reality. This man judged me by my appearance, my race, my apparent profession. And in doing so, he revealed not only his ignorance, but his own corruption." The comments on the broadcast exploded with support. Hashtags like #Justice for Victoria and #Richard Blackstone Fraud began trending across all platforms. As Victoria walked toward the exit, leaving behind a completely devastated Richard and a party in total disarray, she knew that this moment would not only change her life, but would serve as a warning to all the powerful people who thought they could humiliate others without consequences. Because sometimes the person you choose to humiliate may have much more power than you ever imagined. And justice has a very particular way of leveling the playing field. 6 months later, Richard Blackstone watched from the window of his modest apartment in Queens, a brutal fall from his Manhattan penthouse. The IRS investigation had frozen 90% of his assets. 3 former employees had $1 million lawsuits. His company had filed for bankruptcy. That night's live stream went viral with 50 million views. Richard Blackstone Fraud continued to trend. No reputable company wanted to be associated with his name. Victoria, on the other hand, had turned the episode into fuel for change. Henderson Aviation Solutions grew 300% in 6 months with contracts from companies that valued real diversity. Michael graduated with honors and was already flying corporate jets. "Mom," Michael said during a family dinner, "I still can't believe you endured all that humiliation just to expose who he really was." Victoria smiled. "Son, I learned in the Air Force that the best battles are won with strategy, not anger. I let Richard hang himself with his own rope." Margaret Whitmore, who had witnessed everything, became one of the greatest advocates for anti-discrimination policies at her foundation. "That day changed how I view privilege and prejudice," she confessed in an interview. Victoria's story inspired dozens of other people to speak out against discrimination. 3 executives were fired after employees recorded their abusive behavior. Richard, isolated and broken, finally understood that power without humanity is only temporary tyranny. Victoria proved that underestimating someone based on their appearance is the most costly mistake one can make. The real victory was not destroying Richard. It was building something greater than his pettiness could ever achieve. If this story of resilience and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove. Never underestimate the power of those you choose to humiliate.